everybody. This is Bishop John Selders.
And this is Pamela Selders.
And guess what? It's time for the half hour show. We are glad to be here with you. We're excited about our guest today, who's a dear friend we've known for a number of years, who actually right now is on the ground in what has now become a worldwide conversation, and I would say a worldwide justice conversation and a much needed conversation for those of us in the United States, and in particular those of us who are in the justice movement. So why don't we just start? No further ado, no further chit chat for me in particular. Let's bring in Dr. Yamila Shannan, who is in Ramallah right now. Yamila.
Hello, good evening.
Hey, hey, how are you?
I know it sounds like it's a simple question, but there are times when it's not, doesn't have a simple answer. For most people, I simply say, fine, thank you, or alhamdulillah. But the truth is, today is we've been going through a lot of emotions, anger, fear. We're scared, we're worried, we are hopeful, we are strong. Today is a day where I mostly feel sad. I was thinking that maybe because it's a Friday, and on this Friday we think about our spirits and we remember the 200 people that we have lost, whose lives were taken in the past couple of weeks. And I'm learning as I age to also pay attention to those feelings and to allow myself to grieve and mourn, and knowing that we will continue the fight. But today is one of those days. Sorry, maybe this was a longer answer than you expected.
It's perfect, because that's what we are asking you. We want to know how you are doing, in the situation and under the circumstances that you're in. We're trying to make sure that we here really understand what it means to live in a war zone, and be a people who are under siege, under attack.
Right.
So thank you for sharing from your feelings, from your heart, and even from your thinking around this experience. We appreciate it.
So maybe we should go back, Yamila, and kind of contextualize who you are and why you are back home, if you will. So could you tell our audience a little bit about who you are, your work, and then this particular time, and why you felt, I would say it in the religious context, felt called, quite frankly, to re-engage, to go back home and be where you are, and do the work that you are now continuing to do from that space.
Yeah.
Both my parents are Palestinian, and they, like many other Palestinians, found themselves outside of the country when the state of Israel was established, and then the Jordanian and the Egyptian government took control of the rest of Palestine. And then, like many other Palestinians, they thought it was temporary and they were going to return, and mine luckily did. I was born in South America, in Colombia, and when my mother brought us home to Palestine, I was 8. She spent 11 years fighting for our right to live in the country, because according to the legal system that the colonial regime has, people who were not physically present in Palestine in 1967 lost their right to residency. So after 11 years, including their own Supreme Court, we got the right to live in Palestine. And all Palestinians, I mean, we are the indigenous people of the land. And according to Israeli law, we are all alien residents in perpetuity. Like there's nothing we can ever do to change that. So like the best that a Palestinian at this point, in some parts of Palestine, at best, we are alien residents. So Palestinians in Jerusalem have a very like a huge mix of legal status, and Palestinians who remained in their land in 1948 have become, in some technical way, citizens of the State of Israel, although legally third or fourth class citizens. But so this is, I'm currently in a village near Ramallah, and I decided to come back. People ask me the question, why did I decide to come back? And I think that it's easier, or the question that I have is, why didn't I come back earlier? There's something about, you know, I came to the United States on a scholarship, and I did my graduate school, was invited to also do a doctorate, which I did. And then one thing leads to the other. I actually in 2014 and 2013, I was getting ready to come back to Palestine. And with the murder of Trayvon Martin, and then the following year, Mike Brown, and as the movement started, I think that was one of the reasons why I stayed. I think there was a part of me that hadn't experienced that that sort of uprising, that, you know, rising up. And one year led to the other. And this last year with Corona, I kind of, for the first time, had the chance to be home and think about where I am and where I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that. You know, here people are calling what's happening there, you know, many things, many descriptions. They're calling it apartheid and other things. Can you explain to us what is happening from your lens?
Yes, I mean, I want to start with saying, yes, it is apartheid. And it's not only apartheid. Apartheid has a particular history and has very, you know, specific legal definition. And that definitely applies to Palestine. That is definitely, as have been demonstrated by a couple of non-Palestinian human rights organizations, because Palestinians have been talking about this for a while. But finally, when non-Palestinians say it, people are paying more attention. Mm-hmm. It is important to point that it is apartheid happening in a colonial context. So I prefer to call it colonial apartheid. Because if we only talk about apartheid, I worry that we will not be talking about colonialism. And apartheid alone does not explain everything that's going on, and does not actually point us to a vision towards what might be done for towards justice and towards a decent life. So part of what's happening in Jerusalem, for example, apartheid wouldn't explain it. There is apartheid, let me be clear. There's definitely a system that these human rights reports explain very well. There are roads that are for Jews only, and there are the plates have a particular color. The ID, on our ID, we have to state our religion. And that's how it works. So at any minute, any soldier can tell my religion, and they can determine in which category and what kind of, how much dignity I deserve. And this is happening in the context of settler colonialism, which is important to point out, because what's happening in Jerusalem, for example, is part of a settler colonial project and not as much part of an apartheid regime. Apartheid works in different ways. What's happening in Jerusalem is what we have coined the language of the Judaization of our country, including Jerusalem. And it's not only symbolically the names of the streets and the roads and the rewriting of history and a supposed archaeological knowledge, but also in the very physicality of who lives there. So Jerusalem has been, when I lived in Jerusalem and I moved there in the late 70s, this is the story that I know. Since the late 70s, my memories, my understanding is that there's this constant attempt to push Palestinians out of Jerusalem and bring in people who belong to the Jewish religion in accordance with the government's legal system. A few years back, the Israeli government Supreme Court decided that this is a land and a country for people who belong to the Jewish faith from all over the world. And those of us who have been here for centuries, at best we are alien residents, but in their ideal, in their plan, in their explicit plan is to empty the country from its indigenous population. So apartheid, while true, doesn't capture the whole picture. And settler colonialism relies heavily on the idea of settling to displace. So in other types of colonialism, the indigenous are used as cheap labor exploitation. When the colonial power decides for whatever reason that they have an alternative for cheap labor, so to boost their capitalist project, then the project towards the indigenous becomes elimination physically, forced displacement, and elimination also in the imagination of the world. So you hear a lot of the mainstream media following the footsteps of the Israeli media, referring to us as Arabs or Muslims, which is true. We are Arabs and many of us are Muslims, and we are Palestinians. So even the very framing of the conflict, when they say, you know, Jewish Palestinian, it just doesn't work. It's grammatically incorrect. A, because there have always been Palestinians who are Jews and continue to be Palestinians who are Jews. B, the problem is not between Jews and Palestinians. The issue is Zionism, the ideology that created and supports the state of Israel, which is at the heart a white European supremacist ideology.
Yes, so then the colonialism that you speak of, because when I think of colonialism, I think of Europeans, I think of, white people from Europe coming in and settling in other people's lands, taking it and, claiming it for their own, manifest destiny and all of that. Correct. So, is there a connection there between, European and when you say colonialism, are you talking, I understand that it's a framework of white supremacy, racism, that's that, but say more about what you are saying when you say settler colonialism, or the colonial with the colonial part of it.
Thank you so much for this question, Pam. Actually, it's been an ongoing project in conversations with a number of our indigenous families in the United States. When we sit down and we share stories and we see the similarity. So in the United States, so there's a practicality that I have to say that, yes, it is literally white Europeans that came to Palestine, just like white Europeans that came to Turtle Island. So in that way, it is colonialism in the most literal sense of the word. Also, the abuse and appropriation of sacred texts, you see the similarities. So this whole idea of a chosen people and a promised land and a lot of the mythologies that Zionism perpetuated in the 30s and 40s, to convince a lot of Jewish people to come to Palestine, as an extension of what they thought would be an extension of their religious exercise, but also to convince the whole world, particularly the Christian world. So there is research that shows similarities between the Zionist ideology and the ideologies and discourse of the settlers that at least the first 100 years in what now became the United States. So, for example, Steve Salaita, and I can text you the name of the book, writes a beautiful, amazingly powerful book comparing the founders of both settler colonial states, the United States and the State of Israel, and showing the similarities. And some people have talked about how they literally, the Zionist intellectuals and thinkers, they literally looked at the United States and make references to the United States, to the settler colonial project in the United States. Now, in a bigger picture, when you look at settler colonialism all over the country, the world, when you look at Australia, for example, you look at indigenous people in South America, you look at, you see the similarities, and it becomes easier. It's not a coincidence that many Palestinians, when we travel around the world, we find ourselves relatively easily, connecting with the indigenous populations because we are going through something similar. In the United States, the way the history evolved, and you think of 500 plus years, in the Zionist regime, it's happening on steroids. The technology is different, and the discourse, the justification, the story was bought in part because there was a whole world that needed redemption after what the white Europeans did in Germany against people from the Jewish faith because they were Jews. So there was a world prepared to that. And there was also a reorder of the world, that emerges after World War II, where capitalism and imperialism are now taking a turn in a different direction. And gradually, as we see war economies becoming the norm, then the State of Israel becomes a very important tool in the hands of the United States to support regardless of what happens. The last point I want to say is that the reason, there are actual memos that are sent to people in the media and in academia. There's also a similar censorship around using the language of colonialism, of apartheid. And one of the reasons is because if the United States were to accept, to allow for the discourse of colonialism to become understood, then it will need to deal with its internal affairs, not only in what relates the indigenous people of the United States, but also in what relates to the reparations for people of African descent who were kidnapped from their countries and brought in as cheap labor. The US would have to acknowledge that it is built on stolen land with stolen lives. So that's another reason when the US stands with and protects Israel, it is also protecting its own colonial legacy and reality.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and see, here's one of the issues that when we talk about Palestine and Israel, right, mm-hmm. and even begin the conversation, we have to back up a bit and talk about what are the through lines or connecting pieces that white settler colonialism is designed to produce, right? And in a very simple way, I refer to it like this: when I am on the ground, say in Jerusalem, when I'm in East Jerusalem, I feel like I'm at home. I pass right. brothers and sisters that are standing in front of a shop or a store. I give them the Negro nod, and they give me the Negro nod back. Right. I mean, it's very simple. I go over to West Jerusalem, and while it's pristine, the guys with folk with guns. I feel like I'm in the suburbs. right? And I don't feel as comfortable. I feel like I'm only given a pass because one, they somehow sense I'm an American,
Right.
so that I have American money, right? And so when I'm in conversation with some of our acquaintances and our friends, and we name this, when they have connections to the Jewish, lobby here, they then want to explain it away. And I'm like, no, you can't explain this away. I know what this is. I'm a black man in America. I can tell this thing everywhere in the world I go. So that's the first thing, that we got to tell the truth about it, and tell the truth about the project called white settler colonialism that has been engaged for hundreds of years, right? So let's do that. The second thing that I think is important that you mentioned, that I want to be in this conversation today about, is that the current situation, it really gets started because a neighborhood is being encroached on.
Right.
Just a stone's throw from Al-Aqsa and the Temple Mount. So when I heard about it, I immediately knew, they getting ready to do it, an Ariel Sharon move. They getting ready to move, and sure enough, it went there. And the hostilities that are there are based in the occupying force, where you can literally go into a neighborhood. And when I say this to brothers and sisters, we kind of know what that feels like. Because we know what gentrification does, right? It just goes in, moves you out, creates a new thing, and says you gotta move, and we don't really care where you move. Get your stuff. When we have told people that literally the folks show up in the morning, very early in the morning, with bulldozers, and they tell you got 20 minutes to get your stuff and get out of there, because we're getting ready to level this place. And within months, they created a whole new compound with other folk who live there that are not related to the people who have lived on that land for generations. Right. There's something really, really, I don't care what religion you are. I don't care what side of the proverbial political fence you are. There's something immoral with that. And this conversation is about what's right and wrong. It has far less to do with, I get the political intrigue and all of the, you can get all deep and then people say, well, it's complicated. No, it's not complicated. No, it's not complicated at all. Somebody's wrong on this thing. And some people have the right to be. People have the right to live and be. Governments come and go, but people don't. You don't have the right just to eliminate people, and you don't have the right to bully people because you got bullied. I'm gonna stop there. Could you say more about that?
Exactly. I mean, I just want to preface it by saying, which is probably why it's no surprise that the Black Palestinian solidarity in the US emerged the way it did, because Palestinians also in the US are more and more becoming aware and understanding the similarities of it. So to your point, yes, I'm going to focus on Jerusalem for a moment, but in general, I'm going to give a couple of examples of the legal system. I mean, we know that in the United States, a lot of the atrocities happened protected by the law, right? So legal does not mean right or moral. So for example, they have a law in their books that says that if you're not Jewish, you need to prove a very beyond any doubt that you have a very strong connection to the city of Jerusalem in order for you to be allowed to continue living in Jerusalem, even if you and your grandparents and your ancestors, regardless, it doesn't matter how many centuries back your ancestry goes. So a Palestinian from Jerusalem, for example, my sister, is married to a man with a Jerusalem ID. And here's their dilemma. She is not allowed to go live with him in Jerusalem because the Israeli state refuses to give Palestinians Jerusalem, like the right to live in Jerusalem. So they've been married now for 30 some years, and they've had a case with lawyers for 30 some years. She's not allowed to go live with him in Jerusalem. And if he comes to live with her in Ramallah, then he loses his right to live in Jerusalem, right? So what happens to that family? I mean, what choices do these families make? It's because you don't want to lose your right to live in your city, but the government is not allowing you to extend your residency to your spouse. And then so that's one example. Now in Sheikh Jarrah, which by the way is my neighborhood, I grew up in Sheikh Jarrah. Some of my classmates are from the Kurd family. So I was telling my sister, I bet now they are the parents of these young people who are doing the amazing work. I bet some of their parents were our classmates. So to your point, and what's happening in Sheikh Jarrah is not new. Like they've been going after neighborhood in Jerusalem of, like I said, for decades. And they have successfully displaced Palestinians. In Silwan, for example, you can apply for a permit to build or to expand on your houses, or in Jerusalem for Palestinians. Permits are rarely, if ever, granted. So you don't get a permit. You spend a lot of money, a lot of years, and then you don't get a permit. I don't remember the percentage, but it's probably 99% of the time that your permit is rejected. And maybe I'm being too gracious when I say 99%. And so then, but then you actually need to build. You need to expand. The family is expanding, so you go and build the house. So now they come and say we want to demolish it because it is illegal. So one of the families in Sheikh Jarrah, after they built their house, the judge personally, physically came down to close the house. No, the judge didn't just issue the order, physically came to the house. After the house has been closed for a number of years, then they say, actually, we're going to give it to these people because they are of the correct religion, right? So then the man says, wait a minute, I built this house. This is my sweat, my money, my dream. So if you're not going to let me live in it, I want to tear it down. And the court says, no, you're not allowed to. So like it's literally physically in this generation, people are coming to take the, like another example, this other family, they built their house. They said, we're going to demolish it. They, like you said, oftentimes 20 minutes is a long time. I mean, they also demolish our houses for other reasons, even when we have a permit. So the permit actually is no guarantee. But then they send you the bill. They've just demolished the house you spent a lifetime building, and then they send you the bill. It's like sometimes when I think like my English is not that good, but I feel like there's got to be words to describe, I don't know, cruelty. I don't you know. And so Silwan is made up of a number of neighborhoods. And at this moment, just like they are attacking Sheikh Jarrah, which is a few, like you said, like only 2 kilometers away from the old city, from the mosque. Silwan is a Palestinian town, a beautiful Palestinian town. That from there, it's on the southern end of Jerusalem. So from Silwan, from the mountains of Silwan, you see Jerusalem and the old city. It's absolutely gorgeous. They've been attacking Silwan for decades. And at this very moment, past Wednesday, the court decided to postpone the hearing on a number of houses. So it's the same strategy. They divide them into neighborhoods, and each neighborhood, you know, they have 2 or 3 houses in each case, and sometimes 1 house to prevent the possibility of a serious organizing around it. And you have like in total, like 8,000 people who are now threatened with being displaced. Like this is now in Jerusalem. Imagine what kind of childhood that is. Imagine the young people in Sheikh Jarrah, they were born into this. They were born knowing that their house is, you know, that they're gonna take their house from them. They're gonna steal their house, and they're gonna actually displace them.
Mm-hmm.
Yamila, we are out of time. our half hour has gone by so fast. It has gone by so fast. Can we invite you to come back at another point and continue
Yeah.
this conversation?
Because we haven't even gotten into the conversation about the water rights,
The water and
other things that are really, really happening that Palestinians are having to live through.
That's right. The security fence. When I tell people it's not a fence, it's a wall, right? And all of there's so many very particular dynamics of a life of a Palestinian in this land that I would love to continue to unpack and to continue to reveal to folk who for all intents and purposes, they've never had to think about it. They don't know. They've never been to Palestine, Israel. They've never traveled to that part of the world and to understand what's going on.
And people easily dismiss it too. Oh, that's them over there. And even within the Jewish community, they'll say, oh, those are the Zionists. They're not a part of us. Those type of Jews, and just, step out of any responsibility toward affecting any kind of change, or are really just educating themselves so that they will know, this is all of us. It's not just Jewish people, it is all of us that, we all need to step in and we all need to be involved in righting great wrongs around what's happening there.
Yamila, would you one last quick word? We're way past our time, but you get the last word here. If you were to communicate something you want to say to the folk who will see this and begin to ask their own set of questions, what might you say to them?
I mean, I would start with saying, listen to Palestinian voices. Pay attention to the news. How many times the news actually include our voices, and how many times we are spoken about, and how many times what is said about us is said by the Israeli government itself. So now, thank God, there's social media, and our young people are doing an incredible job using social media to communicate directly with the world. Follow them, comment on them, engage them in conversations, and ask them questions. They are happy to talk. Like, all of them are now going on Instagram and they do live videos. So it's easy. And now there's technology that helps with translation. So language is not a barrier. That would be my final word. Follow our young people in the streets who are doing everything they can to communicate with the world. We don't want to wait until a genocide happens and then look back and say, we didn't know. No, we know. Let's do something to stop it.
Yes. Yamila, thank you so very much. We will continue this conversation. We are, as many of you already know, those of you know, we've gone to that part of the world a number of times. We're looking to come back as soon as we possibly can
and bring others with us.
And to expose. That's exactly right. To make sure we made the commitment. And More Monday, our supporters have also helped us make the commitment to expose African Americans in particular and other persons of color to this part of the world, and to begin to make the link. I said most recently, the injustice that is in South America, in places like Colombia and Venezuela and Brazil, is the same injustice that is occurring in the Caribbean, is the same injustice that's occurring in Africa. That's the same injustice that's occurring right now in Palestine. And so, you're our sister. You're our sister friend and family to us. We will be in touch. More Monday folk. You all know we will keep on this case. We will share news. We will share links. We will keep at this to continue to tell what I believe is the untold story about the what is right and wrong in a place like Palestine. Let's continue the work. Thank you, Dr. Yamila. We love you, and we appreciate you, and appreciate your truth telling in this hour. We'll see y'all soon. Peace.
Bye-bye.
Bye.